Dude, it's my pet peeve, man.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy when a guy has a great camera and it's in his backpack.
Yeah.
If it's not out, you don't turn it on.
He was a brave man wading the river with that camera and his tight waders all weekend.
Any of the cameras will take a good photo. It's really about lenses.
No one cares about the angler behind the fish. They want to see the fish.
Like boat anchor, because as soon as you pack them in the backcountry, they stop working and they just weigh 10 pounds, so they're just an anchor.
So I wanted to get into camera gear just a bit. Say guys, they want to upgrade from just their camera phone or, some point and shoot camera, maybe get into DSLRs, and, both of you guys can kind of speak to this. Let's maybe talk about 3 or 4 cameras that would be good entry-level DSLR type cameras that guys could maybe look at.
Well, for me, I really, really like Canon, and I really like Panasonic. I think Sony makes some great cameras. I don't have a ton of experience on Sony, but Brian, I know you shoot on Sony. Phil and Court both shoot on Sony, and so I have a little bit of experience there where I know the photo quality is there.
Yeah.
But for me, a really good entry-level camera would be like a Panasonic G85, I think it is. It's mirrorless. It's super light. You can get different lenses for it that are interchangeable. It does a good job on video. And then any of the Canon series, there's so many good ones in Canon.
For guys that maybe don't understand that term, what does mirrorless mean?
So a DSLR means it has an actual mirror in there. And so before the image actually hits the sensor, it's being reflected off of a mirror. And that's been the way that cameras have been for a long, long time. Sony's, Nikon's, that kind of stuff have a mirror in them. Where mirrorless is now being just direct right to the sensor. And Sony, Panasonic, Olympus, they're kind of leading the way in this mirrorless. And there's some benefits to it, and there's also some cons to it. But, they're getting so close nowadays that it's really hard to distinguish which one per se is quote-unquote better. Mm-hmm. But, mirrorless is generally a lighter camera, smaller, less expensive. And then you start getting into some of the full-frame mirrorless or DSLR cameras.
Yeah.
And in general, they're going to be more expensive. Mm-hmm. I personally shoot on Canon still just because I like the controls and I like having, that full frame. And if people don't know, full frame is just basically a larger sensor. So you're going to get a bigger image, more data, which is good and bad. It's good if you're going to try and use it professionally. It's bad if you're trying to conserve space on your computer and you don't need a professional grade image.
Yeah.
I don't know, Brian, you can probably speak to
Yeah, I would say that all the DSLRs and mirrorless cameras out there by the main creators or manufacturers are pretty darn amazing nowadays. So it really, you'll hear this a lot on forums. Most people will tell you that our photographers are going to talk to you about you'll spend way more on your lenses, and it's more about the lens than it is the actual camera.
Yeah.
And really that's the bottom line here is any of the cameras will take a good photo. It's really about lenses. Lenses are where you're going to spend your money, and lenses are where the magic happens. Now, the cameras themselves, it's my opinion that it just comes down to the controls you like and the feel of it, and what's intuitive for you, and then its versatility. So for me, I shot on Canon for a long time, and I love Canon cameras because of the menu systems, the touch screens. It's like a new guy's dream. Like if you've never used a camera before, it's pretty hard to fail with a Canon. It's a great camera to learn on.
Yeah, I agree.
I have seen Nikon and Canon side by side, and I actually think Nikon takes slightly better photos than a Canon does. But I find the menu system and its user-friendliness and everything to be far behind the Canon. And then for me, because primarily what I want is to capture film, that's my goal, my biggest goal. I'm a videographer, a filmmaker first, and then a photographer second. So for me, it's very important that the camera actually record video well. And so I want something that does 4K and does 4K well, and handles low light, because that is a videographer's like main struggle. We can't jack up ISO the way that a photographer can for photography. So there's really only one camera on the market for me right now, and that's the Sony like A7S II or the A6500. Those cameras, all the Sony mirrorless, alpha mirrorless cameras are incredible 4K. They're easy to use on video, especially once you figure out how to do it. Been teaching Chad how to run it.
Yeah, I just picked up the A6300.
Aaron Snyder, my partner on the Gritty Bowman podcast, he runs the I think it's the 5D Mark IV, or
which is a
Canon, or I don't know. It's like it just came out just barely.
Yeah, 5D Mark IV.
It's like $4,000 camera, and horrible on the 4K video side. Like the codec is all jacked up, and it's just not a good video camera. But he takes amazing photos with that. Before he got that, he ran the Sony alpha mirrorless cameras, and got amazing photos with the Sony. Loves the Sony. But he takes a lot of astrophotography and nighttime photography, gets the stars and so forth. And the low light capabilities of the Sony are phenomenal. So for me, for video, it's just a pleasure to use, because I can film without worry about graininess, and I can film in just most conditions, indoors or out. So, and it's 4K, and I can film in slow motion with the Sony. I don't get all those features in a Canon. But what happened was whenever Aaron took photos in low light conditions with a Sony, he never could get the camera to give him the look he wants, because it's almost so clear in low light that he didn't get the shadows and the darkness, and it wasn't taking photos like your natural eye would see it. It was taking photos like the camera saw it. And he just had a lot of trouble with that. And on the Canon platform, it's so much easier for him to get those photos that just knock your socks off. And with the Sony, he always struggled with that. So
the Sony, the ISO capability is so good.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not good for guys that want to do nighttime photography.
And I've heard other guys say they're fine with nighttime photography. And I've seen Aaron compare all his nighttime shots with the Sony next to the Canon, and I've looked at them, and you like he says, you're picking fly crap out of chili, but I mean, it's minute differences, but you can tell. And in every case, I preferred the Canon image to the Sony.
But another great thing about the Sony, for those guys that haven't seen the Alpha series, for guys like us that are doing a lot of backpacking, hiking, going deep, the size of these Sonys is almost half that of other DSLRs.
It's tiny.
It's tiny, and
not just size, the weight is so much lighter.
Yeah, it's a lot less weight you're packing in.
Right now, for a beginner, for a new guy, if I were to say, get a camera that to me is the most versatile, and it's the Sony, it's the Alpha, it's the Sony A6500. The 6500, I think, has been out since February, or something like that. It has a touchscreen now, so it's a crop sensor camera. But like what you were saying earlier, with a full frame, you get all that light touching the sensor, and you get a slightly bigger image. But the cool thing with the crop sensor on the Sony is the low light capability is so powerful that you still get that incredible image without having to have that large sensor. So it's almost like a full frame camera. Like, I've seen the video from it, and it's amazing. And so I have both the full frame and the crop sensor. The full frame A7S II is like $3,000, and I think the A6500 is like $1,400. So the crop
Body
sensor,
only,
yeah. And I think the crop sensor, the A6500, what's nice, like Chad said, is it's tiny. It's got touchscreen. It's their flagship crop sensor camera by Sony, brand new. And that thing is pretty darn hard. I mean, it's pretty hard not to get a killer picture. And one of the things that you heard a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago about the Sony mirrorless was they just didn't have lens options. available. But now there's like more than 95 lenses available for the Sony, something like that. And Sony now has come out with their G series lens. Zeiss comes out with some, and some of these 50 millimeter 1.8 and some of the 1.4 lenses are just phenomenal. And so the other problem with the Sony a couple of years ago was you just didn't have the lens to highlight the camera's abilities. But now, because they're becoming so popular and so many people are picking up that you've got Sigma and Zeiss and Sony all coming out with new lenses for this platform. It's just really cool to see. So I think, I just like the power that comes with that 6500, the Sony A6500. And if you're filming wildlife, one thing that's great with the crop sensor is when you take the benefit to that is, as I hear you talk about photographing for fishing, it makes perfect sense to use a full frame camera because you're getting all that is wonderful about the full frame in that all the color, all the light, the biggest sensor possible to capture your image. But when you're filming a deer that's 100 or 200 yards away, with the crop sensor, automatically you get what that means is it zooms you in by a factor of 1.6, at least on the Sony.
Yeah.
So if you have a 200 millimeter lens, it's actually, you multiply 200 times 1.6, and that is
3 or 320, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So you've taken a 200 millimeter lens and turned it into a 300 millimeter lens simply by using a different body. So a lot of the outdoor photographers and filmmakers that I know, they're running all their big zoom lenses on a crop sensor camera so they can get closer to the bird in the bush and so forth. So for long distance, most of the outdoor photographers I know are often running a crop sensor camera for that. And then for close-up shots, like for fishing, a full-frame camera. So
now the other benefit with these Sonys, Brian, explain the clear image zoom.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this much or really get into it. But I've played with it, and the people in the few YouTube videos I found where they've actually utilized it, I've seen really good comments.
Yeah.
It's all been on the video side, so I don't know how well it translates into photography. But Sony has what they have clear image zoom. They also have optical zoom, and then they have digital zoom.
Right.
Okay. So your optical zoom is really what the lens can do, right?
Yep.
Your digital zoom is some kind of built-in zoom inside the camera that digitally brings you in closer to the image, okay? And a lot of times you can go up really high with that. But then they have this thing called clear image zoom. When you set the camera on that, it will just give you, it'll 1x or 2x whatever you're
focused on,
yeah. So I've been playing with it, and I'm having a difficult time telling the difference between something that I've used clear image zoom on and something I haven't. So, for example, I have the Sony 70 to 200 millimeter lens. When I go in and I put it on clear image zoom, I zoom in with a little button on the camera, and it'll go up 2x that number. So it'll take it from a 200 millimeter lens to a 400 millimeter lens,
which is huge. I mean, that's huge.
It's a big deal. And so if you were telling me how you really like the 50 millimeter lens or an 18 millimeter prime, well, what's really neat about this is you can get that prime and have that, let's say a 30 millimeter prime. So the benefit to a prime lens really is, like you were saying, Derek, is it's so crisp. The image is so clean. You get beautiful, beautiful bokeh. The blur is just right. You like the shape and the look of it. It's just buttery smooth. It's hard to do that when you have a zoom lens. But you can take that prime and use Sony's clear image zoom that's built into the camera. And basically you have a 30 millimeter prime that goes from 30 to 60 millimeter through clear image zoom. So it just gives you that little extra bit where you can zoom in and out. and it doesn't change the amount of light coming into the image. So if you're at 1.8, it stays at 1.8 from 30 to 60. So you now effectively have a lens that's a super fast, but also has the ability to zoom in and out, even though it's technically just a prime lens. And so I haven't played with it on photography, but on video, it's incredible. Yeah. So,
and then you consider these crop sensor cameras like the A6300 right here. That's a 16 to 200 millimeter lens I have on that camera.
Yes.
So with clear image zoom, I can get it out to 400, and then you factor in the 1.6 crop sensor, and I'm over 500 millimeters. So essentially, I can go from 16 to over 500 with that one single lens.
On a crop sensor camera.
Yeah, on a crop sensor, yeah.
Yes, and you can do similarly, like you can take, like I have the Sony 70 to 200, and it's fixed at 2.8, and so 2.8 aperture. So if I put a doubler on that, it's 140 to a 400 millimeter lens, which is great.
Yeah.
And I only lose 2 f-stops on that, so 2.8, I go to 4.5, something like that. It's still relatively fast, or 3.6 or something like that. I mean, it's still a pretty fast lens.
Especially for wildlife stuff that's far away.
Yeah. So at 400 millimeters, when I put it on a crop sensor, it's really 600, close to, something like that.
Yeah.
It's 600 millimeters. And then when I use clear image zoom, it's 1,200 millimeters.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah. That's like a wildlife photographer's dream.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like we talked about the weight of the cameras and stuff. Weight is such a huge issue. In fact, that's my biggest issue with my Canon. That and the video capabilities. I actually have the Panasonic and an external recorder just for video use. But for the photos, the weight of the Canon, it drives me crazy. Like I love getting out and I love being where no one else is. And a lot of times that means hiking. Well, if I'm going camping and I already have 20 pounds of gear between my waders and my sleeping bag and my tent and my food and everything, it makes a huge, huge difference when I'm packing my bag and I go, do I really want to bring this lens that weighs 2.5 pounds by itself?
Yeah.
Right.
So I start limiting myself to, okay, I'm going to take 1 or 2 lenses when I go. And then the body itself is so heavy, where with the mirrorless, like a Sony, some of the lenses are really heavy, but most of them aren't. And the body is so much lighter that it's so much easier to take all the lenses that you want.
Yeah.
And the extra batteries and the things like that. So it's just like a comfort thing.
Yeah.
Where for me, I'm like, sweet, I'm packing all this extra weight. It's awesome.
Well, that was one of those things that we didn't talk about yet, and that is how you pack and carry the camera on the water. One of the things that I did that I like to do is use the Peak Designs clip.
I was going to get there. I want to talk about that. Maybe this dark energy charger and just a few tricks and tips that we could give guys for not having to pack so much gear, but also have your camera readily accessible to grab that snapshot when you need to grab it. How do you carry your camera when you're on the water?
I carry mine on a strap. I have a low design or whatever you call camera strap that just hangs off of me, and it's really easy. Like the camera actually has like a carabiner type thing that it slides on. So when I'm taking pictures, it's almost as if I don't have a strap on. And then I can just let the camera hang from me. However, that being said, if you're in a river and you're in places where you might slip and fall, and you have in the past, you want to be really careful about that. And so I'll bring a little waterproof bag that I can stick my camera in and throw it in my backpack so that I can feel comfortable when I'm crossing the rivers and things. But for me, the majority of the time when I'm on the river, if my camera isn't accessible, I'm not going to stop. If I see, let's say I'm out on the river with Court And there's really cool shadows, and the light's great, and Court's making a beautiful cast. And I go, man, I love that shot, but my camera is packed inside my waterproof backpack, inside a case. And
Dude, it's my pet peeve, man.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy when a guy has a great camera and it's in his backpack.
Yeah.
If it's not out, you don't turn it on.
Yep.
Yeah. And guys should probably buy the insurance on cameras. If you're wading rivers all the time, one of my cameras ended up in the river once, and that was not a good day. Actually, it was my wife's camera.
It is not a good day. I mean, when you consider, let's say, like you, Brian, you've got your Sony, the A7, that's like a $3,000 body. Then
plus a $2,000 lens, plus, it's about $5,000 to $6,000 hanging around my neck.
Yeah. And if you go on the drink, you might as well just have gone in your bank account and flushed $5,000
Dude,
into
trust
the
me.
toilet.
The whole time we're fishing, I'm like, it's just weighing on my mind. It's I almost want to get a Canon 70D for photos or something.
He was a brave man wading the river with that camera in his tight waders all weekend.
Yes, I can see though. Orvis makes that waterproof sling bag.
Yes,
right.
We've got 2 of them on order actually because
we're going to Prince of Wales.
We're headed to Alaska in 3 weeks, and we're anticipating rain all week and with our 2 weeks. But we got to carry camera gear around, so
it's nice to be able to throw it in that bag, like you said, cross the river and so forth, but then pull it back out when you need it and when you feel like you can have it out. And have you used camera covers? Rain jackets and
stuff?
A little
bit, yeah. I have one. I use it sometimes. Court has like a little neoprene cover that he puts on his camera so that when he's out fishing and stuff, if it starts raining, his camera's actually protected, even though it's like on that Peak Design clip right there on his backpack.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a really cool little cover, and I've thought about getting one of those, but the problem for me is the way I carry my camera, it might not work the same way that Court is using his.
I really do like the Peak Designs deal, and with the little tiny Sony camera with like a 18 millimeter or 30 millimeter lens on it. It's just this little deal. It's ready to pop off, and I still have the camera strap around my neck. So, but this way it's up a little higher, set it down, hanging off my waist, and it's not hanging and swinging like if I move. It's just locked in, and then I can quickly pull it off. And with the Sony, another thing to mention when you're filming in 4K with that thing, especially with a wide angle, it's got built-in image stability into the camera body itself and into the lenses often as well. And it's phenomenal how stable the image is when you're hand-holding it.
So I have the same Peak Design clip and cover that Court has, but I haven't had a chance to use it yet. Have you noticed when Court has that camera strapped to his chest right there, does that inhibit his ability to cast at all?
If you position it right, it shouldn't. But I know, like for instance, with me, I'm left-handed, so I carry my camera on my right side, just so it's not in the way at all. So I think just being conscious of where you put the camera when you're carrying it is going to make a difference.
Yeah, I think, for guys, that's really the issue, right, is you want to have your camera out and readily accessible, but where do you put it so you can still cast and go about fishing for the day? So
yeah, with me, what I do is I use the straps on my pack and the carrying strap of the camera. And I just position it in a way that it's fixed in there unless I reach in and move that strap and just pop it out. It's quick, it's easy, but it's not just swinging around on me,
Well, I was going to tell you that I got an Aqua Shield rain jacket from B&H Photo, and it's like this little shield that goes over. It's for, you can pick which camera body you have and what lens you have. And it velcros around the hood, the end of the hood on the front, comes back. It's like a rain jacket, basically, and it's got a screen in the back. And your hand goes up a little a little
Port.
yeah, and you can access all the settings and you can see through the plastic screen, but it's completely covered in this rain jacket, and it's a heavy duty material, like not unlike a North Face jacket or something, right? And use that a bunch, and it's kept my camera safe. It breathes. One of the things that I don't like about some of the cheap plastic raincoats you get is they don't breathe. So as they're getting rained on, in Prince of Wales Island, it's very humid.
Yep.
And so it's sort of like still getting really wet inside through the camera and everything in a way because of the heat, and it's warm but wet, and it's a condensation nightmare.
So basically, you bought a Sitka gear jacket for your camera.
Yep. It's always, and it's got an OptiFade kind of pattern on it as well. So, but it's made by AquaShield, if I remember correctly. That's the name of the brand, and it's worked really well. And so I read a lot of people use that. But the reality is, when it gets like that, I like to bring out the GoPro, just because it gets me good photos and good shots in the rain, and I don't have to worry about it killing a $5,000 camera.
Yeah.
And the new Hero 5 is a phenomenal camera.
It is.
It comes already waterproof. You don't need to buy a separate waterproof case, 4K video capability, and it just takes really good images.
Yeah, the photos are great. So, have you used one?
I have,
for photography?
Court's got one, and I've actually buying one. I was actually almost bought it last night, but I'm going to order one today or tomorrow to take to Iceland and Japan, because I have some shots in mind that I think are going to be really cool, and I can't do it with my Canon.
Yeah.
I use the I use the Karma grip for it, and I have it on the Peak Designs clip, and I just put it on one of my shoulder straps on my backpack, or you can put it on your hip, but it's right there, and literally it just pops off in a second, and I hit the record button on the grip, and the camera boop comes alive, turns on, and I'm recording like instantly.
Those things are so cool.
Yeah, and the new Hero 5 has that quick record button, so you don't have to click power on and then the record button.
Literally, I'll hit the record button while I'm still fishing. I had it on the other day, and it's starting to record, and it's on the Karma grip, so it's balancing the head. You know, it's a gyro. And I'm fishing, and it's catching me reeling in and all of that. And its stabilization built into the Hero 5 is insane. And you add that to the Karma grip, and it's even more stable. And once I got it in, then I could just pull the camera off and get all these different shots and hand it to a buddy, and he's getting the footage with the camera, and it doesn't fisheye like your old GoPros do.
Right.
It's incredible. I mean, if you put it on a horizon, you know, and you run the camera up really close to the edge, the frame, if you have any straight lines on that, you can kind of see a little bend. But man, other than that, and especially if it's close distance, you just can't tell that you're running a GoPro. I mean,
they're crazy.
Crazy good. Hey, one other quick tip I wanted to cover, and then we should wrap up here. For guys going deep, backcountry, want to cut down on weight like Derek, you got some killer trips planned this year. Iceland, Japan, Canada, Alaska. This is a dark energy charger. Brian, you've used this more than anybody I know.
Yeah.
Explain this battery, its capabilities. I mean, this virtually weighs nothing.
Dude, I love this thing. Aaron and I came across dark energy, I don't know. He came across it a little over a year ago, and at one of the trade shows. And we were recommending different chargers, but we were just saying, look, they all break. They all run out of charges really fast. They don't work very well. And we did a bunch of backcountry hunting podcasts on that. But then we came across this, and they claimed that you could drop it in the water, and it can sit, I think, how many, like 5 feet, 10 feet, something like that underwater. Yep. It can just survive without breaking. They run it over. They shoot it with a shotgun. It still works.
Aaron froze it in a block of ice.
Yeah, so he dropped it in the water, like they said, the first thing he did when he got home was do all the stuff to it. Drove over it with a car, dropped it in the water, left it there for a few days, came back and got it, and he's put it in the freezer.
Yep.
And then pulled it out after overnight, plugged it in, and bomb-proof. That just kept, everything's worked.
Yeah.
So one of the things I run into in the backcountry a lot, and this was especially true with the Sony batteries, more so than the Canon, the cold weather would suck the batteries dry. So I'm forced to bring, like, one of the things that I bring often with me is hand warmers. Mm-hmm. And then I'll just shake up one of those, hand warmers and drop them in my battery bag inside of a insulated pocket of some kind, a pouch. And so the batteries stay at warmer room temperature or warmer. So they don't just suck the life out of them because they're cold.
Right.
Then at night, I put them in my sleeping bag, and I sleep with them inside my sleeping bag. And then I get them out in the morning, and I do another hot, hand warmer. And it's kind of a pain in the butt to keep my batteries from just cycling off when they're not in use. The Dark Energy seems to hold a charge. We hunted in super cold snow conditions. Aaron was in BC and icy conditions, and this thing it keeps its charge. The cool thing, the negative thing about the Sony is their batteries, if you don't have a Sony brand battery, like if you get their knockoff, a Wasabi or something, which are really inexpensive, they lose their power just sitting in your office after you've charged them by some percentage per day. But basically, I've had some go dead, never used them, charged them, set them down, they'll go dead in 7 days or 8 days. So that's frustrating because you charge them up and then you're not using them and they're still running dead. It's ridiculous. So I've invested in Sony batteries more than I have in the knockoff batteries because they seem to hold a charge. They still lose it, but they might drop from 100% to 90% in the course of a month sitting on the shelf, where the other ones are dead. So, but one thing that's super awesome is this Dark Energy charger on a USB cable. I've just got a long USB cable. I can run my camera off of this through the USB port. So I can throw this in my pack or on my hip and have the cord running through, and pretty much I have endless power supply in the backcountry.
That thing lasts forever.
Yes.
That Dark Energy charger. You can charge your cell phones, your cameras, any electrical device.
Aaron just wishes they made it bigger. So he wanted to make one that hold twice as much power and lasted twice as long. They said that they might do that, but they really found that this is the ideal size and the ideal design for the market. Just carry 1 or 2 or 3 if you need to. Well, Aaron decided that that they should just make it into one, and if they weren't going to do it, he was. So he just duct tapes 2 together, and then they're just there, and you have a 2-power one. But seriously, you can run your camera off of this thing, and that's a game changer for me. Because
I think that'll charge your cell phone 5 or 6 times?
4 times, typically.
Times? Yeah,
4 times, but at your GoPro, it's like 10.
Yeah. Comes with a little built-in flashlight in it, right?
Yep. So this cover pops open. You have a 2.4 amp or a 1 amp connection to charge, so you can speed charge or slow trickle. And then it's got a little light here in emergency situations if you need to use one. I ran it down because I used it to run my charge my phone all weekend or all week when we were on the road trip. So, but this thing is worth anybody who fishes or backcountry. The cool thing is once you close it up, this thing can get rained on. It can drop in the lake. It can do all that stuff. Yep. But mostly, it's not temperature sensitive. And dude, the cool thing too is it just seems to take a beating and last. So the other thing was we use a lot of anchor chargers, ANKER, which Aaron joked that should be spelled ANCHOR, like boat anchor, because as soon as you pack them in the backcountry, they stop working and they just weigh 10 pounds, so they're just an anchor. Literally, we've gone through, we have like a box of anchor chargers that just failed on us. So we ended up, at one time, we were just bringing 2 or 3 with us at a time because we didn't know which one might fail in the middle of a trip. And when we're filming these backcountry things, you're not going back. You're out in the country. You've got to have something that works. Well, the good thing with these is that we've been using these for more than a year and a half, and the cycles, I just keep charging and charging. I was talking to Garrett, the owner of the company, not too long ago, and he's like, dude, this thing should break before the battery inside stops being able to charge and take a charge and stuff. And so far, that's what we found. So,
however they're making them, they work, and they're fantastic. And for all you listening, we have a deal with Dark Energy right now. You can get 15% off. Just go to darkenergy.com, their website, type in the coupon code GRITTY15, and you'll get 15% off.
Yeah, it's cool. And that thing, right, like that 15% off, like whether you buy one or don't buy one, I really don't care. I'm just telling you, it's a great product. I don't like to promote products on Gritty Bowman unless we get some kind of discount for the consumer to use it. So this was cool because they dropped it by 15%, and I think they really only have this coupon code with a couple other individuals. So we're one of those kind of special groups, so that's pretty cool. So Gritty 15, and you get it for $85 instead of $100.
Yeah, it's worth every penny. So guys, we've covered Peak Design clip, Dark Energy charger, a slider sling. Any other tips for guys going to the backcountry, having camera readily accessible so they can capture shots?
I think for me, the biggest tip that I can offer anyone looking to buy a camera is do some research. Figure out exactly what you want it for. Do you want it more for video or more for photos? Do you want a good crossover? Because camera gear is expensive, and nothing's worse than buying a camera and investing in lenses and things, and then 6 months later wanting to switch platforms because it's not what you thought it was and it doesn't serve your purposes. So put in the time, do some research, figure out exactly what you're going to use that camera for, and then make that investment, because it is an investment. And take some time to research out the lenses you're going to use, because if you're not going to be doing wildlife stuff, you might not need a really expensive like distance zoom lens. You might just be able to get by with a 50 mil lens, if that's, you're going to be taking pictures of pretty much fish or portrait stuff of your family, then you can
good
get by
50
with that.
millimeter lens is ideal.
Gold.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think one thing that you can take comfort in is a zoom or an expensive lens doesn't really lose value. They tend to retain value. There's still, if you had a Sony 70-200 or a Canon 70-200 millimeter lens from 4 years ago, and you bought it for $2,500, it's probably still worth $1,800,
right?
So unlike a camera that you bought 5 years ago, which probably isn't worth nearly as much, it's over half the price or less what its original value was. So lenses, if they're taken care of and they're in good shape, they retain value. That glass is worth a lot. It's just like a set of binoculars or a spotting scope. They tend to retain value. So invest in good glass with comfort, and know that if it's not the lens you want, you can always trade it in or sell it and apply that income to something else. It's not like they depreciate that quickly. So I don't know. I am curious with the other settings. You might take photos on of a guy that's just fishing. You get a cool shot of a guy in the moment reeling in a fish. What do you typically take your shots on that? Is it also 1,000 on the shutter speed or higher, or?
When a guy's fighting a fish, I definitely like to stay around that 1,000, just because I try and get it so that the fish is jumping or breaking the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I love catching those water droplets, and I love if I can focus in on the fish. If I have that quick shutter speed, the fish is going to be in focus. It's not going to be this big blurred mess.
Yeah.
And so I still try and keep around that 1,000 or above. That being said, a lot of times the really good dramatic light is going to be, in the evening and the morning. And so you have to drop that a little bit to compensate. So then I'll maybe drop down to like 500, bump up my ISO, something like that, to really capture the lighting. Because the lighting is going to be what really sets a photo apart between something that's, it's pretty good, or wow, that shot is breathtaking.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine the aperture is set around 5 or something. I mean, do you keep it, because your depth of field would be pretty minimal if you're shooting at 1.8.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to bump my aperture up to like a 4 if I'm trying to get a picture of a guy, or maybe even like a 5.56.
Okay.
Just to be able to get more feel for the background. But yeah, I try not to go real high above that, because I like to try and pinpoint focus somewhat. But 1.8, like you just said, isn't going to work for something that's like,
a moving target.
A moving target, one guy, it's going to be out of focus.
Especially if you're trying to get the fish in focus.
Yeah.
And it's breaking the surface. I would think that even at 4, it might be challenging, depending on how far away the fish is, I guess.
Yeah.
That depth of field, though, because that would be annoying to get back and see that, it's not in focus.
Yeah, it was tough. I actually went tarpon fishing, and the cool thing about tarpon is they jump so much, and so it was really a challenge to get the fish in focus jumping. And so, a lot of my shots were wasted. They were just like a blurry mess of a tarpon jumping, and so...
sad.
Almost.
How do you like do you like to run the Canon on auto focus, or do you manually focus?
It really depends. If I'm doing macro shots, I tend to do full manual. If I'm doing something that is really like let's say a fish jumping, because the lens oftentimes isn't fast enough to focus on that fish for that split second. And so what I'll do is I'll find something that's a similar distance away. So if the fish, court's fighting a fish or whatever, and the fish is 25 feet away, I find something 25 feet away, focus on that, and then when that fish breaks the surface, I can snap a picture. Versus if I'm just taking a picture of like... a guy holding a fish or a guy fishing, what I do is I'll pick a focal point. You can go in and pick like, let's say the far left side of your screen is going to be where it focuses. And then I'll leave it on autofocus, and then I'll just focus off of that.
I know on the 70D with the touchscreen, one of the things that was really nice about it was I could touch the subject that I want to be in focus.
Yeah.
And it would focus on that subject or that or that. And so you could just run it on full auto. The fish is jumping in the water, and you just touch the screen where the fish is jumping, and bzz, you're in. Primarily for video.
Yeah. Game changer.
That 70D or Canon 80D, that's a great starter DSLR for anybody wanting to step up.
The only downside is it's a crop sensor camera, and it doesn't do 4K.
Right.
But it is a great camera to learn on.
For photos.
But I will say this, that the new, what I heard on the Alpha Mirrorless podcast, I'll plug those guys, the Sony Alpha Mirrorless podcast, they have a podcast where they compared all the different cameras, and I believe they said the 6500 now it does have touchscreen, I know that, but I think it does the same thing where it allows you to touch the subject you want to be in focus. And so you set your aperture at 1.8, and I've used this on the 70D. If it was 4K, I would love it, but and I'll be zoomed in on the end of the rifle. It'll be in focus, but back by the stock, it won't be in focus. Where the hunter is, his eyeball is looking through the scope. It's not in focus, and then I can go and touch the eyeball, and the focus will switch.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Without touching the camera at all, except for the screen. Sometimes that's too fast. I want it to gradually focus, so I might just slow that down in post-production, or I might just manually rack focus it instead. But that A6500, I'm kind of looking at probably selling my A6300 and buying the 65 because of the touchscreen. Just for that. And I've heard it's not the greatest touchscreen in the world compared to Canon, but just that step up better. And I wish I'd known it before, because it's only like $200 more than the 63.
Yeah.
So,
well, guys,
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's things that I definitely wasn't running my shutter speed at 2,000.
Me neither.
So,
not even 1,000.
Yeah. So, and I have noticed, there's just no doubt about it. Getting water droplets coming off the fish and all that is just, and the crispness of the photos is amazing. And then burst mode, that's something I need to employ a lot more of, because you just being able to get those 5 shots in a row or something like that is.
Yeah, most good DSLRs will let you go as low as 5 and probably as high as 10 shots per second.
Yeah,
right.
And it makes a difference. If a fish is opening and closing its mouth and there's water droplets pouring off, if I take 5 pictures instead of 1, there might be 1 or 2 where the water droplets just look really cool, or the position of the mouth,
right.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And nowadays, it's not like you're burning through film that costs you money.
Right.
You just get to your computer, you sit down, you go, yep, out of these 100 shots, 5 are really, really good.
Delete.
And you just, delete, dump the rest.
Yeah. And you shoot everything in RAW?
Yep, everything in RAW. And that's not always necessary for the average guy.
Right.
I'm trying to sell a lot of my photography or run it in magazines or whatever, and I get some of the shots blown up, and so that's why I prefer RAW, because it's a bigger file and I can do more with it and I can manipulate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
that whole discussion on, whether you use Lightroom or Photoshop or, whatever in post-production, that's a whole different podcast. And but just curious, do you do a lot of post-production editing?
I try not to do a ton.
Yeah.
I try and start with the best image that I can. I think it makes a difference. I think if you start with a great image and then you tweak it just a little bit, then you have a phenomenal image. Mm-hmm. And if you start with a pretty mediocre image, you're probably never going to get beyond good,
Yeah.
Even no matter how much you tweak it in Photoshop or Lightroom, you're just never going to get to that next level if it's me.
Makes sense.
Aaron is really good at that. I mean, he can make an image really pop with a little bit of editing and a little bit of changing. And it's interesting to see, like, certain photographers, like Aaron has a style and a color and a feel to his that kind of run true throughout his work. It's really neat to see that happen. So this is neat because it gives people a good hunters, anglers, a good feel for, if they don't know already how to get started and what to buy. It's kind of expensive. That's for real, but man, at the end of it, if you got guys out there really getting tasteful shots and really showcasing the outdoors and the wild and the fish, it just says so much about who we are and what we stand for, and about conservation and about our love for the outdoors. You just can't look at some of these pictures like what you've taken and not just be in awe of the beauty of nature. So
absolutely.
Well, and for me, the reason I actually end up buying a camera is because I've painted and drawn growing up, and I love the artistic side of things. But I was going on a trip to Argentina with my dad, and I wanted to remember the trip. And so I splurged and bought the camera I had wanted to buy for a long time. And the thing is, if you're going to Alaska, if you're going on some really cool trip with your buddies or your dad or whatever it is, and you're paying $5,000 or whatever sum of money to be there, to me it's worth it to spend that extra $1,000 or whatever to get a camera, because now you have something that you can remember forever versus, just like the sheer memory. You can actually grab a photography book and flip through pictures of your trip, and it's just that much more real.
Absolutely. And most guys, if you're just a moderate outdoorsman or hobbyist, maybe your iPhone 7 camera suffices. But there are so many phenomenal cameras available these days for probably starting around $1,000 for a decent DSLR, and the price goes up from there. So, they're not unattainable.
Well, and I will say that you get nice bokeh with an iPhone.
Yeah.
You can get some really nice images using just your phone, and you already own that, right? So I think you get online and you find some tips and tricks for using an iPhone, and you've already got the tool to get the job done, to showcase a lot. So I'm impressed, in fact, with some of the films that are strictly made 100% using an iPhone on 4K or an Android or whatever.
Including your own.
Yeah, I mean, my Alberta film on that buck I shoot, a lot of people don't know it, but we did a film called Alberta, archery bow hunting film, and that film, my camera died. My big $5,000, jobber died on me, and I'm like right before I made the shot, so I pulled my iPhone out of my pocket and I hand it to my buddy, and he turns on the iPhone and he records the whole second half of that film in 4K with the iPhone. And ironically,
I saw that film and I had no idea until you told me that the second half of that was filmed on your iPhone 7.
Yeah, nobody
no idea.
knows.
Cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, so just goes to show that a lot can be done with we live in a world nowadays where we have technology at our fingertips, and anybody who's out there can share their story even with their own phone in their pocket. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, great tips, guys. Thanks, Derek, for coming on, Brian. And everybody, thanks for listening, and stay gritty.
Stay gritty.
Fellow anglers and outdoorsmen, let me share a quote with you. There is a delight in the hardy life of the open. There are no words that can tell the hidden spirit of the wilderness, that can reveal its mystery, its melancholy, and its charm. The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which it must turn over to the next generation increased and not impaired in value. Conservation means development as much as it does protection. Those wise words are from Theodore Roosevelt. Please remember that our right to fish depends on habitat. Let's be good stewards of our fisheries and fight to protect and preserve our public lands. Thank you for listening to the Gritty Angler Podcast. We appreciate your support and love hearing your feedback. As always, good luck on all of your fishing adventures and stay gritty.